Today we're going to create a simple Microsoft Word compile using the standard options in Scrivener 3 for Windows. This might be a novel, but what's covered here will affect non-fiction formats in the same way. So, things to remember before we start. For this to work properly, you will need to have filled out your front and back matter sections and to have added your customised titles to the binder if that's what you require. For our first compile, I'm going to select heading styles that just give us a chapter number. Then I'll do one for binder headings, and finally one with both. These are just using the standard options in the section layouts, but not necessarily the standard layouts linked to the section types. So the first thing we need to do in the compile screen is to make sure we have Microsoft Word selected from the Compile For menu. Then select the trim size. We will cover how you can add different trim sizes in a future video. Now let's choose the title styles from section layouts, because I'm just going to leave the text as standard. Once our section layouts are selected and the metadata is filled out, all we have to do is to click on Compile. One thing to note is that if you go out of Compile at this stage before compiling, your changes will be lost. So make sure to hold down the Alt key so that you save your settings. Compile goes through several stages depending on what you're creating and will take longer the longer your manuscript is. Once it's finished, it will take you back to the editor. Let's have a look at this document. It's important to realise that this is not a print-ready output. There are many things you will have to tweak. It can be time-saving, especially when we get into the ins and outs of changing formats in Scrivener, but you will have to decide if this is worth it for you, rather than just copy and pasting your text into a preset template. The first thing to note is that the text comes across all as normal style. There are some exceptions to this if you've used a specific style, say for centering some text on the page, but in general everything will be normal style, which of course is no good for sorting out titles, for example. Also, a lot of the spacing is created by returns rather than paragraph spacing. Once again, this is not ideal, but is something you can live with if this form of creation saves you time. Of course, you don't have a table of contents, so you are going to have to change some of the text, namely the titles you want to appear in the table of contents. So that's the first thing I would do. Go through all your chapter titles and subtitles if you're creating non-fiction, and assign a Microsoft Word style to them. Whilst doing this, I'd suggest you put in paragraph spacing rather than returns to ensure consistency in your document, but I'm not going to do that here. Then create your table of contents. This should come just before where the main manuscript starts, but you need to make sure that you don't put it within the main manuscript, because you don't want it numbered. So ensure that you have paragraph marks showing to avoid that, so you can see the section breaks. Next, you need to make sure your front matter looks okay. As I said in a previous video, this is likely to need adjustment because Scrivener does not show you WYSIWYG in terms of actual pages. If you find you want to change the appearance of the main text in terms of font and size, I would go to the trouble of changing the text style too. Otherwise you might end up changing things you don't want to. There are lots of other formatting things you might need to change in your particular document to get it to look exactly how you want it. Now let me just create those other two title compile styles. As you can see from this, you do have a fair bit of customization available, even if you don't change any of the formats. Next time we'll be looking at a basic ebook format and looking at how it displays in EPUB 2, EPUB 3 and on the Kindle Previewer.